Well, I'd like to talk to you today about scams in the UAE, especially in Dubai, but you're going to get them all over. But most of the activity that's done is done in Abu Dhabi or Dubai. I actually lived in Dubai for about almost 4 years. And I was very wary when I went to Dubai trying to avoid these types of scams. But I'm going to tell you, they're just almost impossible to avoid. I've never seen a place where I've lived where there's more scams going on. Funny thing is, homicide rate in crime like this is very low in the UAE, but crimes like white collar crime is just literally through the roof in Dubai. And I'm going to show you some of the typical scams that you're going to run into. Almost everybody's going to run into them, and I'm going to show you how to try to avoid them. It'll save you a lot of time and headaches. Because you don't have time to be messing with putting out a lot of fires and dealing with a lot of scams when you get there. And these are very, very difficult to get around, but I'm going to try to show you how to get around this the best way I can. Also, if you're interested in learning more on how to get a second passport or to get your taxes down to zero, our second passports we can get as quick as 3 months on some of them. Go to our website, www.citizenshipquickly.com. Okay, let's get started. I'd like to talk about two companies that we dealt with the same guy, and they scammed our company. And you really have to watch these things, but it's just not this company. A lot of these companies are doing this. These two companies were it's called Gulf Sun Tours and Gulf Sun Businessmen Services. And I'm going to show you the types of scams they use here. One of them they use is when you go to Dubai, what they'll do is they'll actually work with the government on getting your license, and they'll have a list of just a ton of different services and fees that they charge. And they'll tell you these are government fees. What they don't tell you is the fees. They might charge, let's say, 100 US for one little service to be done, and they'll say that's the government charging that. In actuality, what they do is they mark the government fees up, and so you don't know that because you probably don't speak Arabic, and they deal directly with the government. And then what the government does is they'll actually maybe give them a receipt back on this. They'll just basically be asking for a copy of a receipt on any amount, and they'll give it to them. And this is the problem that you run into is you don't know what the cost is unless you're over at the government office yourself. My suggestion is if you hire someone, make sure you go. I know it's a lot of trouble, but if you don't want to get scammed, you're better off going with the guy directly when he's setting up your business, and you pay the government directly and get the receipts given back to you. This way, you know you're not getting scammed, and it's got marked on there, you know, exactly what you're paying for. The ones that we got scammed on, this is actually what we did, was we actually got receipts directly from the government, but there were a few I let my guard down that he actually paid for himself, and those are the ones he scammed us on. So this is a word of advice. Don't give the businessman services your money directly. You need to go with him to the government and pay that money to the government directly and get a receipt from the government. That's the best way to do that. Or just go to the government yourself. The only problem is you don't know what the process is because you know, he might know your system of what you're trying to accomplish better. If you can go to the government yourself and try to get it done, I think you're almost better off. The only problem is knowing your way around Dubai and getting it done. If you don't know your way around Dubai, that's the only problem is getting that done. But you're almost better off just doing it yourself if you're going to be doing that, because you're going to have to go with him anyway. The only other resort to that is just plan on being scammed, because he's not the only one that did this. I had 3 or 4 other ones that had fees that were marked up higher than what the government fees were. And then they don't tell you that part of that is a markup on their fee. And if they got to make money, obviously, you know, they got to make money somewhere, but they're making a fee on top of that, their big fee. And then what they're doing is they're making side fees that you don't know about, and they're marking the fees up because you don't know what the government charges. But again, these two companies, Gulf Sun Tours and Gulf Sun Businessman Services, you need to avoid this company, these two companies, because especially Gulf Sun Tours. They scammed us out of money on the deposit that was supposed to be used for immigration visas that we were supposed to get back when our company left the country, or either switch visas, and they didn't do it. And we actually went to the Labor Department on them. They never showed up, and the Labor wanted us to keep coming back over and over and over again on it, and it wasn't worth the hassle. I just gave him the money. This is the type of stuff you deal with, and this is why I say you want to try to avoid the scams to begin with, because if you don't, the headaches are not worth it. But these are just some of the things that you run into. Another one that they pulled on us was whenever you give a deposit to one of these sponsors, if they're doing services for you. And by the way, too, don't ever get a person to be your sponsor that's also setting up your business. It's a nightmare. And I got another tape on that. One of the problems you have is if you have a problem with him doing your businessman services on getting your visa and all this stuff set up, if he's your sponsor, he can cause all kinds of headaches. And whatever you do, don't have a partnership with an Emirati. Own the company at 100%. You can usually do that with a consulting company. You can also do it with a free zone company. The problem with free zone companies, the licenses are more, you're real restrictive on your offices. You have to be in that free zone to have your office. You have to send all your contracts in the free zone. People do it outside the free zone, but it's against the law to do it. But you're really better off getting a consulting business set up where you actually own 100% of the company, and you can even do that with the Dubai company. But some companies like real estate, if you own a local real estate company there, actually you can own it. Your sponsor would have to own 100% of it, and that is a real problem because you're in a 100% partnership, but he owns 100% of the company. So this is a problem that you run into is you're going to have his total permission to switch to some other person that would own your company, and they can cause you all kinds of headaches. They can invent fees that you don't owe, and if you don't pay them, they won't let you switch to another a partner. It's a headache and a half. I would tell you, don't get in a partnership where Emirati owns any of your company at all. Make sure that you own 100% of the company if it's a Dubai company, or if it's a free zone company. You won't have to worry about that because you own 100% of the company, but you do have restrictions on free zone companies, so you have to take that in consideration. And your fees are typically higher, and you're restricted on really shopping for your offices because you have to be in that free zone for your office. You can have an extra office if you want, but that's just an extra fee outside the free zone. So that's the problem that you have there. So these are some things that you need to watch. One of them is deposit. Typically, if you go in there, if you have any sort of deposit that you give your sponsor, whether it's an employment visa or it's an investor's visa, typically you don't have to do a deposit. They used to have a deposit for investors' visas. That's a visa for self-employed people. Employment visas, now you have to put a deposit in. The employer is typically supposed to be responsible for putting that deposit in. This guy convinced me that was my obligation. Okay, what do you do when you're supposed to trust this guy? Okay, well, we deposited it, and I wanted the receipt back, and he put government services on the receipt. And I told him that's not government services, is for deposit. And that deposit's for me when the money comes back. He says, yeah, it's government. He was telling me it was a government deposit for the money for me when the money came back. Well, I trusted this guy, but in essence, what he did was he stole the money. And then when I went to, as I mentioned to you before, I went to labor, he never showed up for labor. And he knows he's an Emirati. They're not going to prosecute him. This is one problem you have dealing with Emiratis is if you have a problem, they'll win 100% of the time. You're wasting your time trying to fight them. They'll never prosecute them. And this is why I got nothing done with labor with this guy. So do one thing first off. If you go with an employment visa, okay, it's not your responsibility to pay that deposit. It's the sponsor's responsibility to pay it. Okay? If he tells you it's yours, then you go to the government. If the only way you can do it is you have to put down the deposit, and that's the only way you can structure things to get it done. You go to the government with him, and the deposit needs to be put in your name. This was one of the payments that he made directly to the government that I was not, there for, and he basically stole that money. They'll try everything under the book to try to steal your funds. This is the thing that you deal with. It's a real problem. In fact, almost everybody that I talked to there that was a foreigner that had been self-employed had been screwed by, in fact, even my girlfriend there had been, she lost $60,000 to an Indian guy. And remember too, 80%, 85% of the people there are expats. They're not nationals. So they're only there temporarily. They're eventually going to take off and leave. So you're always dealing with someone that's not a local, that's not a national in most cases. And it's very easy for that guy just to pack his bags and leave. And if you've done business with him, he might not finish doing the services for you. It's a real problem. And like I said, white-collar crime is through the roof. Homicide rates like shooting people, robbing banks, that's real low. But your chances of getting stung by in a white-collar type situation, man, is through the roof. Almost everything I dealt with, I had a problem. And with either landlords or whatever. And that's another one I'm going to get to here in a minute. But the deposit, you know how to do that. Pay it directly to the government. Don't give the money to him to pay the government, because the deposit comes back to him. And no matter what he puts on that deposit or on that receipt, remember the funds come back to him if he pays the money. So you don't want to give it to him. You want to go directly to the government and do that. So a couple other things that you run into too is banks. Banks are just as bad. You would think they would be the last ones, because you would think they'd be regulated real good. Let me tell you the problem you have with banks over there. Banks will come in and charge you outrageous fees, and they'll tell you that I sent you an email. You didn't get that? Well, by the way, too, if we charge you a fee, even if it's, and this is no joke, they said, even if it's our mistake, we don't give that back. I said, what? I said, even if it's your mistake, I don't get that back. They said, that's right. And I said, something's wrong there. I've never had a bank that charged a fee they weren't supposed to charge and didn't give me the money back. Well, they said, that's how we do it. And I ended up going to the central bank. I said, this was a pretty big charge that they hit me on. And they said they emailed me, and I said, well, give me a sample of the email that you sent me. I never got anything. They never returned my phone calls or anything. It was a scam by the banks. Now, you might think I'm just talking this up, that banks don't scam people. They do, okay? This was Emirates Islamic Bank that was in Dubai. Let me tell you the stuff they do. And I actually took a case with the central bank on this. And when I went to the central bank, they have about 16 phone numbers with the central bank. None of the numbers can you get through. No joke. I've never seen a central bank so unorganized. You cannot get anybody on the phone. You literally have to write over there. And when I talked to the Emirati who was in head of cases against banks, he said that the banks all do this. It's just a gimmick they do. And he says, we've got thousands of cases, he told me, against that bank. And I said, oh, really? I said, why don't you find the damn bank and they'll stop doing this? He says, what we do is when they want something approved, we just slow down and we don't do it until they change their policy. I said, this is why nothing's getting done. Okay, you need to be finding in the U.S. They would be finding this bank every single day, like maybe $10,000 or whatever dollars a day, until they straighten this mess out. But see, the thing is, the banks won't change because the central bank, they don't have any real strict laws against the banks there. And he told me that they were having thousands of these charges being done, and the bank just makes tons of money off these charges because no one is really stopping them. And it's a mess. And also, too, I would not even advise setting up a bank account in the UAE unless you got a business there. It's almost impossible to do it. It's very difficult. Even when you set up a company there, it takes forever to get the account set up. And you have to have a license there. If you're not licensed and resident there, it's very difficult to set up a bank. I could not even find one that would do it otherwise. So these are things that you have to think about. By the way, I did go to the central bank, filed a case against the bank, did get the money back, but it wasn't worth the hassle. It was just them stealing the money out of the account. These are just other scams that happens there. How do you avoid the bank taking the money out there? My suggestion is, number one, is don't put that much money in a UAE bank. In my opinion, they're not very solid. I've talked to other people that say the same thing. I think these banks are, they're not, the backing of these banks are not real good. I haven't checked the ratings out on them, but I never kept much money in those banks. And I would advise you to do the same. Just keep enough in there to barely run your business, and that's it. Another thing I would tell you is I would advise you not even to go to Dubai. There are a lot better places to go. I like St. Kitts a lot better to run a business from. It's just you don't have the air pollution that you do in Dubai. The heat is incredibly hot there. I've never had problems with banks in St. Kitts like I have in Dubai. It's just a world of difference. And, I can take my bike outside. You can't do that. It's against the law of taking your bike anywhere unless you get out in the desert because the traffic is so bad there. It's just not a place that, and the traffic is just horrendous. I actually ended up taking the metro everywhere because the traffic was just so bad there. And of course, the real estate market has plummeted there. It's back to where the prices were in 2007, and now I'm in 2020. A lot of people have lost a lot of money invested in properties there. They just overbuilt tremendously. They're just skeletons of unfinished skyscrapers everywhere in Dubai now. So, but these are just some things that you need to be aware of. I'll tell you some other scams that are there too are rental scams. Let me give you an example how landlords have a real upper hand in Dubai. But if you know what you're doing, you as a renter can have actually the upper hand. Let me explain why. But you need to know what your rights are when you go there. Typically, when you go to Dubai, they've got the weirdest rental system in the world. When you go there, if you want a halfway decent price on your rent, you either have to pay them quarterly rents. In other words, you have to give them the checks for 4 checks up front for a whole year. If you want a better deal, you give them a check for the whole year. Now, you might say, I would never do that. Well, you can do the monthly, but it's so ridiculously high that it's not worth it. You go with the quarterly. And even on the 12 monthly checks, you have to give them 12 monthly checks up front. They all work this way. You can't pay them a check at a time because everybody's an expat. So they're afraid you're going to pay and not pay and then skip out. So they want the checks so they can cash your checks. They got all the checks have to be dated too with the correct dates. So what they do is to get your deposit back, what they'll do is they'll pull a scam on you. And this is the scam they do. You actually have to get a letter from DILWA showing that you've canceled. That's your electricity and your water. And then due is the phone bill. You have to get those actually canceled, and you have to show them that you've canceled that. And then once you do that and you've left the premises, you get your money back. Well, nobody gets their deposit back there. It's a big scam. I mean, you can have your place look like best hotel in town, and it's not going to make any difference. You're going to lose your deposit. Okay, and what they do is they take your deposit and they replenish the place better than what it was before. Okay, and it's not to do normal wear and tear services. It's to fix the apartment up. Okay, I mean it's a big gimmick there. This is how you get around it because you're going to lose your deposit. Okay, what you do is you have in the contract that the DILWA and the due would be as soon as they're paid for, which is the phone bill, electricity, and the water, the deposit comes back to you that day that you're leaving, okay? And you need to have some sort of penalty if it's not paid. They need to pay you back the money plus interest, okay? Now, if they don't do it, and the way to get them to do it is to get them to meet you at the landlord, get him to meet you, or either the real estate company that's handling the rental to meet you at DILWA or the due company, and as soon as that's paid off, you get your deposit back at that point, and then you leave the next day. If you don't do that, once you vacate, promise you, you're going to lose your deposit 100%. You're not going to get it back, okay? And they might even try to say that you owe more money on top of that. This is the problem that you've got. Now, this is the key. If you cut off your deal and you're due, and you leave the next day, okay, and the guy doesn't pay your deposit back, you can't move back in because you have an jury on that contract, okay? It has to be filed, and you can't move back in if that's because the jury has to be canceled too, along with the deal and the due. So that's got to be canceled before you actually, once that's canceled, then you move out like the next day, okay? And then you can't move back in. So he knows that you can't move back in the premises. The way you do it is you've got to meet him up front to get the deposit, maybe even a week or 2 weeks before. Let him check the apartment out and let him check this out before you get your deposit back. That's one way you could do it. If you don't do that, folks, he's going to take your money. Okay, that's the only way to get around that. And that worked real good for me. I mean, that's the best way to do that. And if he doesn't give your deposit back like he stated in the contract before you move out and after he's checked over the apartment, you don't leave. And that creates a hell for him because if he takes a case to get you out of the apartment, it's going to take him 3 to 4 months to get you out. It is a hell of a situation for a landlord to get you out. He's got to go through tremendous, in fact, he won't take the case himself. He'll hire a lawyer, and lawyers' fees are not replenished on vacating a property. He will not get that back. He'll get the other fees, but he won't get the legal fees. They got a weird Sharia law system there. You can't collect legal fees even if you win. So it's a real pain in the butt, and he knows that. So you just stay in the premises until he gives you your deposit back, okay? And that's how you get that done. Anyway, these are just things that how to avoid these scams. I had one landlord that had mold, black mold that came in the next day after turning the AC on. He knew he had it, and black mold is toxic. That was on a rental there. The guy didn't fix the place, and I took a case against him. I had slimy mold in everywhere. It was growing it was a mess. And see, I had to pay him a year's up front. And then you might say, well, that's dumb to pay years up front. Well, it's about half price if you do that. And that was the key. It was a lot cheaper paying a year's up front. Now, that being said, I would never do that again. But he ended up losing on the deal because I ended up taking a case against him. And I ended up staying in the apartment and replenishing all those fees back, and it cost him a ton of money. But you need to know the system and how it works. But if you go to Dubai, my suggestion is don't buy a house. If you're going to absolutely go there, stay there in a rental for at least, I would say, 3 to 5 years before you buy. I would advise you not to buy there, especially right now with the market the way it is. But that's totally up to you. Anyway, if you want to learn more on this, we also deal with, our company deals with showing people how to get their taxes down to zero or close to zero. And also, if you're interested in getting a second passport in as quick as 3 months, go to our website, www.citizenshipquickly.com, and you can get some help there. We deal with about 72 citizenship by investment, residency by investment countries that if you're not interested in St. Kitts, because we deal with a lot in St. Kitts, we also can help you out with other countries. We can give you advice on a lot of countries, including the UAE, on getting a passport there. But anyway, just go to our website and we can give you, and there's also tapes and videos that we have on this. If you go to youtube.com, you can pull those up, or also our website. Also, if you go to our website, the top of the website, it says apply with us, and then questions will come up, and then answer the questions, and then hit the button that says send to us, and then we'll get back with you and then help you from there. If you got any questions, just put on the notification below, a comment section below, and also hit the subscribe button to the right of your screen. You'll get new videos as they come out automatically, and I look forward to talking to you on the next video. Take care. Bye.